at John Gray's definition of or description of liberalism. And we have done 2-3 sessions before this one. And what John Gray has been saying is that common to all variants of liberal tradition is a definite conception, distinctively modern in character. So liberalism is a modernist ideology. It's a modernist ideology which belongs to post-Christendom European civilization. Modern in character, of man in society. So it's an ideology about man, the nature of man, how it should be, and the nature of society as well, and the relationship between man and society. And he came up with a list of 4 conceptions which, according to him, are common to all variants of liberalism. And those variants are individualism, egalitarianism, universalism, and some sort of progressivism. But what we have been looking at so far has been the conception of freedom, and this is a strange omission, because liberalism is about, as somebody said, that a liberal is a man who believes in liberty. So liberalism is a belief in freedom and liberty. So how can you define liberalism of any sort without a conception of freedom or mention of freedom? So that's why we have been looking at the concept of freedom in the last couple of sessions. So liberalism is about freedom, belief in freedom of some sort. Or if you will, you can use the Latin term liberty. It means same thing. And freedom has traditionally been distinguished between negative freedom and positive freedom. So liberals basically say that they believe in negative freedom and they believe in positive freedom of some sort. But the main concept is freedom. And so without freedom, we cannot understand liberalism. And we cannot even understand those other 4 concepts. Because if liberalism is about individualism, we can't understand liberal conception of individualism without the concept of freedom. Because it is the freedom of individual which defines the conception of individualism in the liberal sense. Because in many sense, for example, there can be many other religions or civilization or ideologies which are individualistic or believe in individualism of some sort. But liberal conception of individualism is to be understood in terms of freedom. So freedom is important not just because that's what liberalism is about, but also because the other concepts which are important for liberalism cannot be understood. For example, individualism cannot be understood without the concept of freedom. Now that we have some grip on the concept of freedom, we can go through this list of concepts which John Gray has come up with in order to define a minimalist conception of liberalism. So it is individualist, that liberalism is individualist, in that it asserts the moral primacy of the person against the claims of any social collectivity. See, so you can't understand any of these things without the concept of freedom. So let's take these one by one. These are important. So John Gray has here used at least 3 concepts. The first is obviously individualism. But individualism itself is understood in the sense of the moral primacy. And the other concept is of the person. And the third concept is social collectivity. We'll come to that. Now, none of this can be understood without the concept of freedom. because, as we'll see, the moral primacy of the person is based on the morality of freedom, which is, as an aside, is the name for a well-known book of a liberal political theorist, Joseph Ross. The morality of freedom. Freedom is something basic. Freedom. Something basic, which it doesn't need to be justified, because something primary in the sense that it doesn't need to be justified, in the sense that any restriction of that freedom needs to be justified. We'll come to that. So that's the thing about moral. So moral primacy of the person. So the moral primacy of the person is based on the fact that the person has freedom. It's based on morality of freedom or primacy of freedom. So the person's will, free will. And the freedom of this will is primary or basic, which needs no justification. So that means what needs justification is any restriction on this will, the freedom of this will. So this person, the person, has moral primacy because it has free will, and this will is free in the sense that any restrictions on this will from outside needs justification. That's what we mean by negative freedom, primacy of negative freedom. And the second thing is freedom of this will, in the positive sense, doesn't need any justification, as long as it is not restricting the similar freedom of the other person, because that other person, and that's where egalitarianism will come, the second point, unless it is interfering with the similar freedom of the other person, this positive freedom doesn't need any justification either. So this is what positive freedom is. And social collectivities come here because traditionally social collectivities, and when we talk about society, we're talking about non-liberal society and non-liberal social collectivities, because they are important. They're important because traditionally, or in traditional societies, the right of the social collectivities over individuals have been generally considered primary. So liberalism challenges that right. So, and major thing is family, because authority of the father and other family members, moral authority over the person, is no longer considered primary, needs to be justified. On the other hand, person's freedom doesn't need any justification because it is prima facie. It's a moral primacy of the personal freedom, which is the basic tenet of liberalism. So that's why traditional family has to be destroyed, in the sense, because as long as that family and its moral primacy is there, the person, the liberal individual, cannot emerge. So the person, freedom and its primacy, and family need justification. Similarly, larger groups like tribes, society as a whole need justification. So social collectivities, the rights against social collectivities, those are negative rights, in the sense that the person, the family's will or tribe's will or society's will needs justification to be imposed on the personal wills. So unless that, otherwise, a person should be free of any imposition on his will from outside, whether it's family or tribe or state or church or any other sort of morality. So because the morality is based on the primacy of the individual will, and that's what individualism is. So individualism of liberalism believe that the individual freedom is basic. It doesn't need any justification, as long as it doesn't interfere in the similar moral right of another person. And the second thing is, any restriction on this freedom of will from outside need justification. For example, a person is too young, so he might parents' guidance or guardianship might be justified on contingent basis, etc. But it needs justification. On the other hand, a mature adult individual's freedom doesn't need any justification as long as it doesn't interfere with the similar freedom of another person. So that's what individualism is. So the first common to all tradition of liberal tradition is a definite conception, distinctively modern in character of man and society. Okay, it is individualist in that it asserts the moral primacy of the person against the claims of any social collectivity. But as we said, this moral primacy is defined in terms of the primacy of the freedom, the primacy of the individual freedom. So without freedom, we can't understand liberal individualism. And similarly, egalitarianism, in as much as it confers on all men the same moral status and denies the relevance to legal or political order of differences in moral worth among human beings. So that's very important too, because this egalitarianism is at par with individualism. But again, this egalitarianism cannot be understood without the concept of freedom. So let's go back to, we had an occasion to refer to this egalitarianism when we were defining or describing the specific liberal conception of individualism a moment ago. But we need to look at this egalitarianism on its own terms just to deepen our understanding a bit. So the second concept is egalitarianism. It's also equality, belief in equality. So it confers on all men, that is, all individuals. The same moral status. The same, that's egalitarianism, the same moral status. The same moral status in the sense that every individual has the same moral worth because of the freedom of their will. So what they do doesn't define their moral worth. What defines their moral worth is this freedom of the will. And in this freedom of the will, all individuals are equal. In theory anyway, they're equal, they have same moral status. So if your purpose of your life is to play cricket, the other person's purpose of life is to, help the poor, that doesn't make any difference to your moral worth in liberal terms, because your moral worth comes prior to your actions, and that lies in freedom of your will. The fact that you can say no to outside and you can do what you want. And that's basically traditional characteristics of God in Abrahamic religions, at least. Abraham's God is free from outside influences. Nobody can limit his will, and is free to do anything he wants. Nobody can limit his freedom in this positive sense. So this liberal individual and his worth is basically sometimes consciously and some other time unconsciously is based on that concept or image of God anyway. So that is egalitarian. Egalitarianism is the belief that all individuals are equal, like they have equal moral worth, morally equal, because their worth is consists in their will and its freedom. And it confers on all men and denies the relevance to legal or political order of difference in moral worth among human beings. So legally and socially and politically, it doesn't matter as far as your status is concerned, whether you are a fornicator or whether you are a pious man. As human beings, your moral worth is not reduced by fornication or not increased by your piety, because your worth is in your will, this pure will and its freedom. And in this, everybody is equal. Now, obviously, liberal societies are hierarchically ordered societies, and we'll finish on that. Like any other societies, that's why they believe in equal freedom. And that's because formal equality, everybody is equal in moral worth. In every society, there are two reasons for that. In every society, at least the societies which claim that people are equal in certain aspects, those equalities are formal. They are used to justify actual inequalities. And one of the things because liberal societies are based on freedom, the concept of freedom, and freedom requires resources, especially material resources, because what limits your freedom, as we saw, is scarcity. And liberalism, like other modern ideologies, recognizes that in order to overcome this scarcity, in order to actualize human freedom, we need to overcome this scarcity. And in order to overcome scarcity, we need to adopt the system of capitalist accumulation. So in actual liberal societies, what becomes supreme is not freedom of individual, but freedom in its concrete form, which is capital or accumulation. So in actual fact, those individuals were able to accumulate better and hence actualize their freedom better. In actual liberal society, they have, obviously, in practice, they have more power and they have higher social status than other individuals who have less resources, because they are able to actualize their freedom, while others are not able to, or not at the same extent. So even though formally everybody is equal because of the reason we just said, actual liberal societies, because of its commitment to capital and capitalism, actually structure hierarchies according to who owns more resources and who has more capital, who has more resources, who has more money. So that's how you can combine formal equality with informal inequalities in liberal capitalist societies. Okay, so that's enough for today. Let's get back to the text and read what we did today, and then we'll finish it off next time, hopefully with the next two concepts. So common to all variants of liberal tradition is a definite conception distinctively modern in character of man and society. It is individualist. That is, liberalism believe in individualism in that it asserts the moral primacy of the person, and that moral primacy is based on the morality of freedom, in that the moral primacy of the person is the primacy of the freedom of his or her will against the claims of any social collectivities. And liberalism is also egalitarian in as much as it confers on all men the same moral status. And this same moral status is based on the idea of the equal moral freedom of the will of each and every individual. And since what defines the moral worth of a person is his or her freedom of his or her will, his or her actual actions actually don't define her moral worth, and they are irrelevant as far as a legal or political order is concerned. But since for freedom of the will we need resources, and since liberalism as a modern ideology believes that we cannot actualize the freedom of our will unless we overcome scarcity, and since it also believes that the best way to do that is to commit the society to capitalism, what actually rules in liberal society is the capital, the concrete form of freedom. And those who can accumulate more they have in actuality more worth. They're actually legally more powerful than others in practice, because they have more money to give to the lawyers. And in political order, they are the one who rule, generally speaking. But there's no contradiction there, because those who can actually those who can actualize their freedom, they are obviously more competent in that freedom of the will than others. Even though formally everybody has equal moral worth, as well as those who are actually able to actualize their freedom, in actuality, they are considered, they hold more power, they hold more influence, they hold more the highest social status and all those things. Okay, so we'll